Hey, John, how's it going? Good to be back.
It's going well. How you doing tonight, Eric?
Doing great.
Real Eric this time?
It's a little later for me than it is for you.
It is. Sorry, man.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So last week, spring break, we went to Chicago, saw Hamilton. A very cool play, very unique.
I'm very jealous.
I've not seen a whole lot of live theater, but
I tried to get tickets when they were here in Portland. It was impossible.
so did my wife, and didn't work.
I have seen a lot of plays. Well, I guess it depends on your perspective, but for somebody from the West Coast, I've seen what I think is a decent number. Anytime I've ever been able to go to New York or London or somewhere, I've tried to catch a show. And actually, for my wife's birthday a few years ago, we took a trip to New York to go see War Horse while it was on Broadway and stuff like that. It was awesome.
Yeah, it was fun. Family had a great time.
Very jealous. That's cool.
Chicago.
What else did you do in Chicago?
I was going to say, to follow up, we actually went and toured Frank Lloyd Wright's home and studio that was built in the turn of the century. Really cool, really cool.
We just stayed around and hung around the house for spring break, and I worked most of the days, although I did take last Wednesday off, and we went down to the Evergreen Air and Space Museum with the boys and kind of had a
Spruce
had a
Goose.
day. Saw the Spruce Goose again. We've been down there before, but we hadn't been down there for a good number of years. I'm not sure Andy actually remembered much about it. I think he was probably 4 or 5 maybe when we were down there. So that was fun.
Well, I just moved. Last week I was in Chicago, and this week I'm in Texas.
Good old Dallas, Texas.
So same time zone. So yeah, it's late for me.
Did you even readapt when you were back in Oregon, or you just kind of did a touch and go?
No, we got home late Friday night, and I flew out this way Sunday. But I did partake in, and I'll see if I can stick the picture in the podcast.
You have to.
A steak called the Tomahawk Steak. We went to some steakhouse dinner for work.
I hear that's big in Texas.
The other night, yes. And yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. You just have to look at the picture of a tomahawk steak. It was crazy.
It was gigantic.
Shout out to my to my fellow dinner peeps here in Texas. I told them I was going to mention that on the podcast. Ooh, you got to say it on the podcast.
But
all right,
how wasn't it like 30 some ounces or something like that? Like more than
36 ounces with the bone, 24 ounces without.
Not a chance. Pound and a half. No, I'm sorry. That's amazing. Only in Texas.
I can still feel it in my stomach 2 nights later.
Stick with it. Stick with itness. Oh, that's
so.
funny.
Should we kick into some follow up?
Yes. Let's do it.
With the water is still wet follow up.
I see that. I see your note in there.
So, 450 million Facebook records were found exposed on AWS servers. So Facebook, once again, leaking data, although this one is technically not Facebook. It's Facebook by proxy.
Yeah.
It was some third party or a couple other developers who had used Facebook APIs to get access to the data accidentally, or however you want to talk about it, however you want to describe it, left some 540 million usernames, IDs, comments, reactions, etc., public out on some AWS servers. So,
yeah,
yay, Facebook.
Open S3 bucket. Didn't this article also say that there were passwords, or was that something else? Yeah. Okay, hold on. Oh, the second AWS server stored data recorded by the At the Pool Facebook game. along with 22,000 passwords.
Okay.
So
some
the passwords were
tiny
presumably
subset.
for the At the Pool app rather than the user's Facebook account. But
Right.
everybody uses a different password for their different accounts, right?
Well, I do. And so should you.
You know what? I gotta say, actually, in the interest of exposing my shame, I actually got a email that said, "Hey, did you log into your Twitch account from Egypt?" And
Uh-oh.
I was like, So I don't remember the last time I logged into Twitch. It's certainly not often on my list, and B, I have never been to Egypt, although I would love to go someday. So I went and put a password in from 1Password. Thankfully, they hadn't actually changed my email address. I was still able to get into the account, change my email address
Right.
or password, and it was a very old, very bad password. Bad John. It was one of my passwords that I did reuse because it was things that I didn't care about, which, yeah, these days, that's really, you should probably care about everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, and I enabled two-factor auth on it. So now I'll two-factor auth into my Twitch account that I don't actually log into very often. So I actually had two other pieces of follow-up as well. The first is about the ASUS update server compromised last. We talked about it I talked about it with Cedric last week.
The legitimately signed updates by ASUS that contained malware issue.
Right. Oh, actually, I guess both these pieces of follow-up are about that. But this in particular wasn't specifically about the Shadowhammer, but about the fact that at least as of 2 months ago, there's a security researcher who had warned ASUS that they had passwords stored in their GitHub repositories.
Oops.
And those passwords could be used to access the company's network, because evidently this security researcher actually logged in using one of the passwords to see if they were valid and was able to get into an email account. And
oops.
That the emails in the mailbox contained, this was a quote in there, contained the exact internal network path where drivers and files were stored. So, if anybody was able to get in, one of the things you have to do, right, is as a intrusion is scope it out, try to figure out where are you, what other resources are around, and where do you move. And if you have information about where things that you're interested in are located, that is a very big thing that you don't have to find, and it's also much less likely that you'll get caught, because one of the best ways to discover somebody in your network is triggering on or detecting that that the searching. So
right, and if you can just have it listed out for you in an email,
right there, and
don't have to worry about hunting.
Exactly. And he found at least two other cases, and evidently the security researcher shared screenshots with the reporter, because after being reported, the GitHub repos were taken down. But anyway, this says he found two other cases of ASUS engineers exposing company passwords on the GitHub pages, and one of these things said it had been there for at least a year. So
plenty of time.
Yeah, and it's you have to be careful what you put in a source repository, right? Because one of the things, I'm not sure you're aware of this, because I know you're a developer, but the source code repositories store history. So even just going and then deleting something out of a file doesn't actually remove it from history.
That's right.
So, yeah, it's kind of by design, Yeah, it's bad. That's bad. Anyway, so my second piece of follow-up was also about Shadowhammer, but it was, one of the comments that we made last week was that it only activated if you had specific MAC address. And so I saw this tweet fly by at some point in time last week where there was a list of the MAC addresses that were targeted. And this actually this piece of follow-up wasn't specifically about the particular MAC address, but in the comment, the second comment in this thread is some code or some, I don't know if it's reverse engineered with then some comments inserted, or I actually don't know the source of the code, but you can see some of the hashes of the MAC addresses that were used to trigger. And there are two of those comments in there were about Huawei MAC addresses. And so the specific comment says, quote, "I wonder how many Huawei customers were inadvertently affected by the ASUS delivered malware because Huawei apparently decided that using unique MAC addresses for each device was too much work." So down in the comment itself, you can actually see that there's a MAC address that's used by every single Huawei E5573 USB modem. So, and the same for a different model for another address. And so, I mean, if a hardware vendor, this just gives me the total willies. I guess it doesn't surprise me that it happens, I guess, but boy, I thought that was the whole point of having MAC address ranges.
Yeah, it's not like they're running out of MAC addresses,
right?
What I think I actually was digging into this a little bit ago. We've only used, or we've only allocated, not even used, just has been allocated. Not even 1% of the possible MAC addresses have even been allocated. So there should be plenty of MAC addresses and no need to just reuse one over and over and over again.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it was that Huawei comment there that kind of made me go, oh, because yeah, if you can, if you're trying to target something, and you can with one line basically say, well, do everything of this. Anyway, that was my follow-up. Check out the link.
Well, my topic is threefold this week.
Threefold? Okay.
It's the same
you're allowed
topic,
to have
basically.
Three topics?
No. It's one topic.
In 3 parts.
But 3 parts.
Okay, it's like a novel or a play.
Right. So, robocalls. Everybody hates the robocalls. And I should probably post a picture in the podcast, in the little screenshots that you can do in the podcast as well, just of my non-answered phone call list. I get, at least 3 or 4 a day. I'm sure you probably do as well.
I had 6 calls yesterday that were spam calls.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I had 5.
I only
yesterday.
had 4
2 today, 5 yesterday, 4 Monday. Yeah.
And the worst is when they're calling from my phone. Like they're
they spoof your number.
Yeah, they're spoofing my number. All the other iOS devices in the house go, "Oh, you're being called. Do you want me to answer on your iPad and your other stuff?" And Shirley actually just this morning was like, "Are you trying to call me? Because I'm getting a call from your number and you're
from
like
you?
right next to me."
Yeah,
like, yes,
that's a horror movie. The call is coming from inside your home.
The call is coming from inside your phone. I'm literally holding my phone and I'm getting a call from it. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so yes, robocalls. Sorry, back to your premise. Robocalls suck.
The FTC is trying to do something about it. They actually handed out multi-million-dollar fines to 4 different robocalling companies. So
I saw that.
It sounds like they're actually finally cracking down, and the fines range from somewhere in $500,000 to $3.6 million. So hopefully that will help from the legitimate side. And then there is part 2 of my little topic here. The FCC has also started demanding that the voice providers, the 14 voice providers across the U.S., start to adopt plans for validating caller ID and to prevent caller ID spoofing with some kind of adoption of a call authentication system, which is part 3. There is a...
So you're telling me I'm going to actually agree with Ajit Pai on something?
I wasn't going to go there, but yeah, I agree with the FCC as an organization's desire to enforce telecom providers to do something about caller ID spoofing.
I didn't realize there were 14 voice providers.
Article says. It's because we're on the West Coast.
I'm not sure.
I think they're more chopped up on the East Coast.
Okay. I was gonna say I think I could probably come up with 6 or 7. If you get to cricket kind of things. But yeah, maybe I don't know what's common on the East Coast.
Well, and that goes into I guess the third part here is there is a framework called Stir/Shaken. Let's see, what does it even stand for?
Secure Telephony Identity Revisited.
Shouldn't that just be for the first time, not revisited?
Yes. And Shaken is secure handling of asserted information using tokens. So that one's much. They're having to really kind of stretch for that one.
But yeah, at least some way to authenticate caller ID. If there was a way that on my phone I could authenticate caller ID, I could just block every number that did not have a valid caller ID. That would be awesome.
Yeah.
So basically how this works, or how, the third article that will be linked here has a short description of how it works in a network. The calling party tries to initiate a call from the originating service provider, who then authenticates that call is legitimate, creates a little authentication header that then gets passed on to the terminating, I guess they call it, that's the lingo, terminating telephone service provider, who then checks a verification service to verify that the header that came through was verified, checks the certificate repository, and then passes the call along to the third party. The article that was linked has, down into the low-level code of how it works. But if this actually works and goes through, I look forward to it, because I'm really getting tired of my phone being useful for everything except a phone.
I actually hadn't read the previous 2 articles. I'd only read the one that actually describes the Stir,
the protocol,
and how it
works.
And I mean, on the one hand, it seems to me to be bizarre that with only 14 players, you can't have them assert, for between the 14 participants. So this is just thinking about the U.S. at the moment. Sorry, that between those 14 participants, that each one of them, if they did a client validation, where I guess you'd consider that server validation for the initiating of the call, that if that wasn't the case, they wouldn't forward it on. You know,
yeah, I'm assuming it's probably more than 14. They just sent it off to the top 14 voice providers. I bet you there's a lot more smaller phone networks when you get out to rural areas, but still, you would think.
I tell you, I would certainly turn on the feature that says, I only accept authenticated calls.
Yep.
That will be fantastic in 2028.
All right. Well, that was my 1, 2, 3 punch there on hopefully secure caller ID authentication and being able to cut down on the number of spam calls is in the near future.
Well, near future. Okay, sorry. So you didn't even laugh at my joke for 2028 a minute ago, but was there any sort of implementation timeline? I didn't see one. Okay, sorry.
I'm going to have to insert a laugh.
You want to bet on
let me just laugh for a second, and then I'll just cut that and add that, because I don't think I caught the 2028. I missed that joke.
You want to bet another $1? Because I'll tell you what, I would be so happy to pay you $1 if it came in 2020. Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Anyways, what you got, John?
Well, I have two. One's a small. Actually, they're both pretty small topics this week. But the first one is basically an Oracle extortion email. So,
I did read this one.
Did you see this?
Yes.
I mean, the thread was interesting too. But it's basically a screenshot with redacted areas of a email from Oracle, basically saying there's a
sales guy, right? It's an Oracle sales rep or something. It's not corporate company-ish email, or at least that's not what I thought it was.
Yeah, I mean, it is from like an account manager, but
Right.
Oracle's basically trying to get, I guess, extort. I'm sorry, I'm just going to say it. No, basically make money from Java as the last real valuable bit of from their Sun acquisition. Maybe it's not the last thing. I don't know. It's the only thing that I can think of these days. And for the last couple of years, Oracle has been tightening the screws and saying, "Hey, you're not going to get to use the JDK, the official JDK, unless you pay us a tremendous amount of licensing dollars." So anyway, this email is, hope this finds you well. There is if you don't pay without proper licensing in place, you will not have access to the first quarterly non-publicly available critical patch update for Java 8. So, and it's basically Java 8 is where the new license went into effect, I believe. So, essentially there are major security updates available that you're not going to get because you haven't paid us money. And
so the insecure software is free. The secure software you got to pay for.
Yeah. Well, I actually don't think that you can legally run Java 8 without. Well, there are probably some careful things that you can do, but I think Java 8 in general requires a license.
Got it.
Anyway, as far as I'm aware, most of the projects I'm aware have actually moved to OpenJDK. So, you don't have to be tied to Oracle. But then the other thing I thought would be interesting about this topic was to ask you, what was your first introduction to Java? Because you've been a Java guy you were a Java guy for a long time. Right?
Yeah. So I actually worked on even like, God, it was 0.7 something. Like I remember this was way, way long ago when it was originally called Oak internally at Sun Microsystems, and they were just starting to distribute and share it. So yeah, I was on Java long enough that I think when I interviewed at the current company I had 8 years of Java experience at the time, and Java had only been out for 8 years. So, but only really like 1.0 had only been out for 6 years or 7 years. So I was questioned
did anybody catch? Oh, they did. Somebody caught it.
Yeah.
Are you lying?
The manager said, "Now, can you explain how you claim to have 8 years of Java experience when it's only been out for 7?" I said, "Well, so let me tell you, this is how old it is. I helped work on the Java port, the original Java port into Novell NetWare. That's how old we're
You're dating
here.
yourself, my friend.
Very much so. Very much so."
I'll be honest, I'm not sure I knew that Java ran on NetWare.
The whole NetWare 5 installer is what I worked on, and because we had to be GUI, because that's when Windows was getting out, and NetWare was all,
Yeah, green screen.
Text, green screened and text, and we had to come up with a GUI, so Java was something we looked at real early, and the first Java app on NetWare was the installer, the NetWare 5 installer.
Wow, I did not know that. I've worked with you for a very long time. I didn't know that.
That
awesome.
was my baby. That's what I worked on.
That's cool. So my first introduction to Java was in 2003, I think. So I actually don't remember. I don't know when it was first announced, but I know it was already pretty big at that point. And I actually went and interviewed with the team who was doing all Java stuff. And the manager was like, "But do you know any Java?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Well, why are you applying?" I'm like, "Oh, I could do it. Whatever you want." I mean, and so
how hard could it be?
Yeah, how hard could it be?
Come on.
So, which was a little ironic, probably, but that's I guess I've never had a problem with lack of confidence, I guess. So, but I mean, the way it worked out, they were like, "Well, I kind of think that's maybe BS," but it was for the same company. It was an internal transfer, and so I was like, "Well, tell you what, why don't just I'll come out there for a week," and I was able to do that with the position I was on. I come out there for a week, work with the team, and then make a decision at the end. And they were like, "Okay, do it." And so that's what I did. I learned a lot of Java very fast.
Mm-hmm. I still think I have Java 1 was the big Java 1 conference badges from 97.
Oh, wow.
I want to say. So, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. Really dating myself 20 plus years ago.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a long time. All right. Well, it's interesting. The thing that also dates me there is, I mean, before Java, which is where I first had like command completion kind of, in IDE, I was writing C++ in VI. In retrospect, like looking back, I'm like, how do you know enough of like the POSIX API? I mean, that's what it was all POSIX code. So, I mean, I guess the API is small enough you could actually load it into your head. But yeah, that's the big thing for me. Anyway, all right, reminiscing. Okay. Anyway, that was my first one. It was mostly a small thing about, Java extortion. Go to OpenJDK. I mean, if anybody's doing Java these days, or hey, just use Node. It also has Java in the name of the language. even though JavaScript has nothing to do with Java other than the fact that Java was popular, and so
that's right.
I think that's why JavaScript was named JavaScript.
I don't like either of those languages anymore, so that's the common theme for me now. Is if it's got Java in the name, I'm out.
If it's got Java in the name, yeah. I think my friend, that's a measure of familiarity breeds contempt.
I'm gonna yes, probably.
I'm sorry. Okay, my second topic, also not a super big one, but I saw this blog post actually today, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I should actually mention something like that. So this is a guy that I followed on Twitter for a long time, or actually back before Twitter in RSS. But this is hacked.com. But Phil Hack, he was at Microsoft, and then he went to GitHub, and now Microsoft really, really wanted him to work back for them, so that they went and just bought GitHub.
They bought GitHub, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he was why. No.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he did back at Microsoft, and I kind of followed along, I don't remember why, it must have been in some blogs I was reading or something like that, was he wrote or was instrumental in writing the .NET package manager NuGet. And, obviously, worked on it a very long time ago, built it, and then eventually went to GitHub and blah, blah, blah. Back.
So NuGet is similar to something.
It's just like NPM or
apt-get.
Yeah, apt-get. Yep. And it's way you can just
but for Windows, Microsoft.
Windows
or
and
.NET, I guess. .NET. Yeah.
Yep. And so anyway, I think he said this started with a comment from somebody where he had gone back and edited some of his old NuGet packages, and somebody said, well, did you sign them? And he's like, no, I did not sign them, and signing them is dumb. So still at the moment. And then he actually has a nice blog post that kind of outlines some of the problems. And at the very end, kind of cut to the chase, he's like, I'll make some suggestions in the next post or something like that. So maybe there'll be a follow up with what his suggestions are next. But I would just say, following through with this is one of the problems with setting up a secure package infrastructure, or any infrastructure where you want to trace and be able to verify the source of something, right? Mm-hmm. The same thing with GPG in why signed email doesn't happen very much is it's really, really hard to set up infrastructure and distribute keys. And in this case, I don't know if the numbers he has in the post necessarily are the best you can get, but they only trust keys from certain people, and getting those keys costs at least $70-something a year, if not a lot more. Anyway, blah blah blah. So he looked at the top 100 packages on NuGet, and of those, only 52 were really unique. The other ones had lots of shared prefixes, but lots of stuff from Microsoft, for example. And of those top 100, only 15%, so 8 out of the 52 unique-ish packages were signed, so not very much. But then he also kind of followed on and was like, well, okay, so what would happen if I tried to say, I only want to trust signed packages? And the first thing he did was to actually say, okay, well, so he said, okay, well, let me just trust NuGet.org. And then the problem with that is that that essentially means anybody who posts to NuGet will get successfully installed because Microsoft signs every package that is posted to the actual code repo with their own certificate. So if you say you want to trust the repo certificate, then all of a sudden it's the same as if you had trusted nothing, right? Or if you said you didn't want to trust anything.
Because everything's trusted.
Yeah. So like trusting a repo, really what trusting a repo is for, if you were to set that option, is to say that you would trust a internal repo that had validated packages that, were approved by our security team for use and stuff like that. You would then say, okay, well, just trust the internal signing. And then, every package that's there you could use. But, as a developer, it's really hard to do that, right? So you can't just trust, NuGet.org. So then he turned that off and said, well, what if I trust, somebody that I know, look at one of the signed packages from somebody that he knows on, has the number of packages out there. And you could actually say, sign, trust something by a particular author, but, even then that will only work if all that author's packages are signed. And so in this particular one, the person he chose has, I don't know, I think he said there were maybe 8 packages and only 2 of the 8 were actually signed. Setting up a secure infrastructure where you actually want to trust, that the source of the package, the package that you've got is from a particular source, and that source is trusted, means you have to have a lot of infrastructure behind it, and it's not something you can really easily kind of hack together. So, I mean, my analogy on this is, what Apple, or maybe to a certain extent Google, although I'm much less familiar with the Android ecosystem, what Apple does for managing developer certs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Apple controls the UI and the certificate distribution for everything, and the client process, the tooling for submission, as well as the enforcement on the devices. And so, they're kind of able to do that end to end and provide a good, I'll say good-ish. You're more familiar with it than I am, so I'll ask you how you feel about it. But a good-ish experience for, managing a secure signing infrastructure. But it's not for the faint of heart.
No, like anything with Apple, it's awesome when it just works, and when it falls down somewhere, it's a nightmare to hunt down where the bug is, or what piece is missing or lost, which happens. So, but yeah, when it works, it's point and click easy. When it doesn't work, it's maddening. Maddening
is probably right. Yeah. Well, anyway, those were my 2. Yeah. Check out the links in the show notes. How about something fun? What you got for me?
So somehow I'm now the sciencey guy for something fun. You're rubbing off on me.
I saw this link, and I think this was a great link. When you posted it in here, I was like, dang, that's a good one.
So we all know that heat moves very slowly through the air, right? You turn on the fire, you're not instantly hot. It has to warm the air around it, bumping into the molecules and all that stuff. Same thing through heat moving through a solid. Well, this article is some scientists have discovered that through certain solids, heat moves at the speed of sound, which is insane. Because how heat normally moves through is one of the analogy they give in here is like take a little bit of food coloring and drop it into water and see how it spreads. It just kind of, it doesn't go in a straight line directly to some other spot. It kind of just fizzles around. But what the scientist had done, he took some heat and a graphite sample and used laser beams to kind of heat up some alternating sections, an interference pattern with bright and dark regions to kind of correspond to crests and troughs. And the crests would heat up and the troughs would remain cool. Okay. And then when you switch off the lasers, at least how you would expect things to happen is the heated crests would slowly cool down until they were the same temperature as everything else,
and disseminate or dissipate into the cooler
troughs, yeah,
nearby.
Just kind of, even everything out. But what was happening in this example of what he has is that heat flowed so fast out of the hot crests that those cooled down and actually heated up the troughs, and the crests became cooler than the troughs. And so what that was be like is, you've got your stove top on, and as soon as you turn it off, it becomes ice cold instantly, which is not how heat works in any other place. It's not supposed to do that. But so that was all really cool until I got to the point where I'm like, how did that work? Well, it works up to 120 Kelvin, which is about
pretty cold.
minus 150 Celsius, which so I looked up what would be something that most people could think about that would be minus 150 Celsius, and that's basically the average temperature of the planet Jupiter.
Oh.
So, very cold.
Okay.
Very cold.
Okay.
But
interesting.
The kind of techie outcome of this one is maybe in the future a practical implementation at some point if they start to develop this concept and idea in using graphite. Maybe that will help with heat management in electronics. Electronics. That's one of the problems is CPUs get really hot and they have to disperse heat. Well, if there's some way to figure out how to leverage this to build more efficient electronics at some point in the future. So that was my something fun. It's a very interesting article. We'll go check out the link.
Okay, yeah. You win. You win this episode. That's the coolest thing.
But you have bees in YouTube. Come on.
I did. I was like, well, what am I going to do? Because I went. We have a Slack channel, where we post stuff, and I didn't actually post anything in the fun this week. So tonight, I was like, well, criminy, what am I going to do for my my something fun? Like, well, what have I been doing in my free time? I've been watching lots of YouTube, and in particular, so this is about bees. So we'll go watch one or two videos, and you'll be like, okay, that's cool, and how are they doing this with no veils and no gloves and no anything? Those guys are crazy. I agree. Yes, I think so. But this is, I guess I don't know if he's a professor. I've assumed he's a professor, but at the University of Guelph. And Guelph.
That's not a typo?
No.
It looks like a key smash.
It does. It's not Welsh. Sorry, any UK friends listening. It is a town. I had to actually look it up on Google Maps. It looks like it's a bit west of Toronto, so in Ontario, Canada, and I don't know why they have at least popular on YouTube bee management program, but they sure do.
Okay.
And, I've watched so many of this person's videos. It's awesome. But the funny thing that I thought I would actually mention, because I watched a video on this last night, is, and this is cheating because you can see my notes. But how do you control bee genetics?
I don't know.
You have to, like, so bees will travel, for the rule of thumb is like 2 miles from their colony. So like a 2-mile radius, which is why you can't really have organic honey for most areas of the country, because you just can't control them, what they'll get on and what they'll do, because 4 mile in diameter is pretty big area.
Right.
But one of the ways that you can control that is on an island. So if you raise a whole bunch of bees on an island and basically do your breeding your queens on an island, you can kind of control the genetics to a much greater degree than Joe Schmo right outside Portland, Oregon. Right?
Uh-huh.
And so, anyway, that's what they do. They have a couple of islands. I actually didn't catch the name of the island. I assume it's in the Great Lakes, because that's kind of where Guelph is near. That they fly out to and have basically hives on to provide the drone stock for their breeding programs. Anyway, it's very cool.
So what is that, to make more hardy bees, or what's the purpose of bee genetic control?
Yes, they breed mainly for 2 things, I guess I would say. The first is for low defensiveness. So so that the bee, when you come up to the hive, they're not on guard and attacking you before you even do anything. So if you watch the videos, they're all manipulating the bees, generally without a veil or a hood, and no gloves, in shorts. And let me just say, that is not my experience so far. Like, maybe I certainly am not as experienced as whoever these people are, but my bees get pretty pissed at me.
Well, maybe just use a different kind of plant for your smoker. One that might be regulated.
It's available in Oregon. Yeah. I have done no such experimentation. But anyway, the second thing that they breed
Bet the honey would taste good, though. Sorry.
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not really high on my list of recreational activities. So
no pun intended.
It's cool if you're good with it, or if you I don't care. Do your thing, man.
Sorry, it's late. I'm getting a little loopy.
You're getting punch drunk. All right. Well, the second thing I was going to say is that they breed for what they call hygienic behavior, which is basically keeping the hive super clean. So if a bee dies in the cell, getting them out, grooming for mite reduction, mite removal, and stuff like that. So anyway, those are the 2 main things I think that they try and breed for. But
cool.
Yeah. Anyway, that's my something fun.
All right.
It's cool. More bee stuff.
One of these days, I'll go watch a bee video.
Today is not that day.
Today is not that day. Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. In the airport on the way home. There you go. Sounds good.
Thanks, John.
All right. Yep. Sounds good, Eric. Have a safe trip home, and I will speak to you next week.
All right. See you, John.
Bye.
Bye.